accessibility is a fluid thing. So it's not just about, oh, this person needs accessibility features and this person doesn't. I mean, I could break my foot tomorrow and then I can't stand to play until you fall. So I need that seated mode.
So I have a question about what current gaps are in accessibility in VR games, but we can expand that to just gaps of accessibility in the games industry. And again, I know Francisco, you've been designing, VR, non-VR, LBE experiences for quite a while. So I'll start with you in terms of accessibility in games. What gaps do you see uh, generally that the industry should consider?
Yeah, that's
And
a
a
really good question.
great question. So
Yeah.
you can take don't have to speak for the industry. Just what you.
Yeah. No, I see. No, I see that I'm getting the harder ones. It's okay. Uh, no, I think I can speak a little bit about how I've seen it change, and then maybe we can extrapolate a little bit based on
That's
that,
good.
as like where it might be going too, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember, I mean, we all remember, not long ago at all, having difficulty settings in a game could be considered like, no, that's not the way my game is meant to be played. My game is meant to be a really hard game, and so I'm not even going to have a normal mode. I'm not even going to have an easy mode, um, because the purity of the experience is that this must be an experience where you have a great challenge and you suffer and you can't get through it, then you don't deserve to play this game, right? Um, and we've seen those same people making those types of games all of a sudden like come out with a wealth of accessibility settings, and so there's been certainly like a big at least the start of a big change in terms of accessibility features. They start being covered in game reviews much more. They start being called out by people who analyze games, who do like deeper game thinking, critical thinking about game mechanics. And so uh, one thing that I will say is that as a game developer, seeing the game reviewers start to call that stuff out more and more helps and sinks in, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard for me to gauge the gaps, because I am in many ways the demographic that games are made for, right? So I grew up playing games. I am super games literate. I I have a full range of motion, and I have like I align with the classic gamer demographic. I have a beard, and so um, it is somewhat. I mean, it's very tragic. I think that you don't notice it. You don't notice what's missing if nothing's missing for you, right?
Sure.
But you do notice if you're paying attention how many more people are joining the conversation now that weren't joining the conversation before, because all of a sudden the games that are being made uh, are being are like they are being considered now in the games that are being made, right? So we are seeing much more diverse cast of characters in games. We're seeing options for difficulty setting. We're seeing all sorts of social topics make their ways into games, into the game's stories, woven into the fabric of the game, which is, I think, the most powerful way of integrating accessibility into your games. As to I unfortunately don't have a ton of insight into like what's next and what's missing, right? I have the insight. I hate to like bring it back always to the matrix, but I have the insight of the first time I saw the accessibility matrix, and I went, whoa, there's way more here than than I was aware of. And there is like my immediate instinct was we need to be looking at this as early as possible in the development process of a game so that we can get in at the entry level, right? And a big part of it was because there's a ton of stuff here that I don't see in games, or I haven't seen in games. I think the um, one that is probably really hard to tackle and that we have a real chance in VR to help with are um, everything that's related to and I'm probably not going to use the correct terminology, but to use of your mobile faculties, to um, dexterity, to body movement. Um, I know that Xbox has done like wonderful work in terms of like creating an accessible controller that people can reconfigure in ways and reprogram in ways that fit their needs. Uh, to interact with games and make games accessible. I want to live in a world where that stuff is not like a weird niche controller that no one knows about, but
Yep.
rather that like games are designed at the base level to be interactive with those types of input methods that can open the door to like all the all the body types, all the dexterity levels, all the motion faculties.
Oh,
There
okay.
is a there's a lens that you can put on when you're doing your high concept for games that is very accessibility friendly, right? So, as an example, with Until You Fall, you could look at Until You Fall's entire sort of high design in terms of the way it tells you where to put your sword to block and it tells you where to hit the enemy for best effect in order to get a crit. You could look at that whole system as an accessibility system, right? Very few of us have actually done the work to become master swordsmen. But I know that when I play that game, I feel like a master swordsman because it is giving me the accessibility cues that I need to do that. But I think that's a really rich perspective that we can do if we don't go the second mile and then say, okay, well, let's make sure that as many people as possible can have that experience, even if they do have mobility challenges. That's it's sort of taking a step back from where we took a step forward. And as an example of some of the stuff that Francisco is talking about, that team, the Until You Fall team, looked early on at the question of doing combat sitting down and standing up, right? And they definitely had a sense that most people would want to be standing up, right? If you really want to feel like a master swordsman, that's a thing a lot of people are going to do, but that's not available for everybody. And so they put in a seated mode from almost the very beginning of development. If they hadn't done so, adding a seated mode afterwards probably would have been prohibitively expensive because the mechanics would have gotten away from where a seated mode was an easy enough thing to do. But because it was always there in the beginning, every choice that they made about mechanics, they also thought about, okay, well, how's that going to affect seated mode, right? It's those kinds of choices that our teams are making because they're looking at that matrix early on and saying, okay, these are the accessibility issues that are really important to us. These are the ones we're going to prioritize. And a lot of times they can serve those ideas and they can serve those players simply by not adding some mechanic or construct that would exclude them in the first place, right? It's they're basically unasking the question of whether they need to make a special feature just by not adding a feature that excludes people because they kept it top of mind, if that makes sense.
Very cool.
I think
So,
one thing
Yeah.
one thing to add on to that, thinking about seated mode, which I think Schell Games does really well in multiple games, offering a solid seated experience, is, accessibility is a fluid thing. So it's not just about, oh, this person needs accessibility features and this person doesn't. I mean, I could break my foot tomorrow and then I can't stand to play Until You Fall. So I need that seated mode. Or, you know, I'm pregnant and my back is killing me, so I need that seated mode. I mean, I'm not pregnant, by the way. That came off weird. But you get the idea. So I think that's something that's the first time I thought about that, like this could be a temporary state. Then it's like, oh wow, then this helps even more people, right? So again, just something to think about along the topic of what does accessible mean? You know, who is this for? Who is it helping?